It's surprising how little I've talked about the MCU on my channel. Despite me starting my channel off talking about mostly comic book adaptations before moving into movies in general, I still would have expected me to talk about these movies before now. And of course I talked about Infinity War, but that's an old video that I don't even really agree with anymore, and I don't even have a ranking of these films up on my channel. I guess it's time for that to change now, because today we're going to be taking a look at every phase of the MCU, starting with the one that started it all, Phase 1. Marvel kicked off the MCU with one of the most consistently solid films in the entire franchise, Iron Man. What makes this movie work so well is the fact that it wasn't really trying to be anything else. It's not trying to be this extremely large superhero blockbuster, it wasn't trying to cram in 3 different villains, it wasn't trying to connect 7 different films together, and it was just a superhero movie, and it's one that works very, very well. It reminds me a lot of Spider-Man from 2002 and how it handles the origin. Pretty much every moment matters, and I think the film never really wastes a lot of time telling you who the character of Tony Stark is. Immediately we get to know him and understand his character and who he is, and we get to feel for how he's going to change throughout the entire film. He has a very easy to predict arc, but that doesn't make it any less good in my opinion. Robert Downey Jr. is incredible in the role, and I think he's extremely charismatic even if he's an asshole. The visual effects are also incredibly good, especially for 2008, and I love how nothing ever looks cheesy or fake in the movie. Don't get me wrong, I think the movie does have some pretty large flaws. I think it's a tad slow at points, and the villain really unravels by the end of the movie. I still like the third act a decent bit, it's still fun to watch, but I can't take Obadiah Stane seriously as he devolves from a pretty entertaining bad guy into a crazy dude who just puts on a big gray suit to fight Iron Man at the end on a rooftop, and it just all kind of comes apart, and it's just not as interesting as the rest of the movie. Overall though, I think this is a really good start to the MCU and a really good way to make a seemingly B-list character at the time of Iron Man into one of the most recognizable and popular superheroes of all time. I'm gonna go ahead and give Iron Man an 8 out of 10 or an 80%. I really think this is a pretty great movie. The second entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like Iron Man, is extremely standalone and barely feels connected to Iron Man at all, and it's a very bad movie. Let's go ahead and move on. I'm joking. That's not why it's bad, granted, but it's not a really good movie. It's too shallow, too uninteresting, downright stupidly derivative and cliche at times, and drowning in its own melodrama that I can't help but take the film seriously. Edward Norton is unironically amazing in the role though. I love him so much here. I didn't when I first watched this movie, but after watching movies like Fight Club and Birdman, I really do love Norton, and I think he does a great job in the movie. However, the character of Bruce Banner has nothing at all in terms of an actual character here. He's just a blank slate, and again, Edward Norton's great in playing said blank slate, but I can't really get attached to the character at all. The character of Betty is annoying, General Ross is just kind of there, and the villain is really, really bad. It's just a carbon copy of the Hulk and being Abomination. If they really wanted 2 CGI monsters to fight, they could have had General Ross just turn into Red Hulk, and I think it would be a lot more interesting. But unfortunately they didn't. Whereas Iron Man kind of feels like a reinvention of superhero movies after they fell into a dark pit in the late 2000s, I feel like The Incredible Hulk just feels like one of those movies that Iron Man was trying so hard not to be. And maybe that's because I don't think these two were originally connected when they were being produced. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think The Incredible Hulk is just a really, really mediocre superhero film that I don't hate, but it definitely isn't anything amazing. I think I'm gonna give the movie a 5 out of 10. Looking back on the early Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think it's actually kind of a surprise how weak it opened up and kept on kicking through. Not to say Iron Man 2 is awful or anything, but it's certainly a step down and only a hair bit better than The Incredible Hulk to me. This is clearly the movie that got them thinking about the long term of their universe, whereas Iron Man worked because it was self-contained and not trying to be anything bigger. Iron Man 2 instead tries to bridge the gap and introduce a bunch of things that honestly would have just been better coming later. But I don't think that the forced references and setup for future movies are the main reason this movie doesn't work too well. Another reason is that there's just not enough payoff to the things it sets up as a movie. The first hour is enjoyable, and I like a lot of the directions the movie tries to go in. The second hour just completely drops that and introduces Nick Fury out of nowhere, and then Black Widow, and then Tony just invents a new element and decides he's not going to be dying anymore, and then the movie just carries on, and then he gets to fight the bad guy. They set off so much in that first hour that's so good, and then the payoff just gets lost because again, the second half of the movie starts with Nick Fury showing up, and they try to build up and tease Avengers. And sure, the teasing is cool and all, but it really just hurts the film, especially because it's not a constant throughout. I think though the movie ends well enough and it's not utterly awful, like I said, but it's really pretty uneven, and it's just kind of an okay movie that is saved through the likability of its cast and an okay villain. Also, Don Cheadle as Rhodey is amazing and so much better than Terrence Howard. Like, even the writing improved for the character, and I really like him in this movie. Anyway, probably like a 6 out of 10 for Iron Man 2. It's got a lot of problems, but I think overall it still comes out to being an enjoyable movie. Everything about the first Thor is immaculate. The set design, the score, the costume design, the feeling of Asgard being larger than life, the extravagant adventure of it all, and the way the entire universe feels so much bigger now. I think it's all so grand and adventurous and so insanely cool to look at. And then we go to New Mexico and all of that is gone. And I think while it's a nice contrast, the two settings conflict more than contrast, and I think it hurts the movie overall. I think Thor has a lot of good moments in it, don't get me wrong. I think the first act is really good, and I like the third act a decent bit too, and I love the Shakespearean nature of the whole movie. It just has so many problems in that middle bit that while it's never really truly boring, I can never say that I'm truly invested the entire time. I do like that this is the first movie that has to deal with being in an established universe, and I think it does it well. S.H.I.E.L.D. feels like it's an actual thing. The mentions of Tony Stark and Bruce Banner are cool, and I love how it starts to feel like things are actually building up. Unfortunately, it just never ends up going anywhere truly cool enough, and it feels like more of a detour just to introduce the character of Thor, more than being a really, really great movie on its own. It fails to be just as good as Iron Man, but it's definitely the best movie since Iron Man. I just feel like the only problems with it are the middle chunk, and I don't care enough about any of the human characters, but I do like that this is the first time this universe actually feels like a universe, and it's really, really fun to watch when it does things well. Also, Loki's a pretty good villain. For my rating, probably around a 7 out of 10. I have a good time watching it, and I could easily watch it again. America, God bless the U.S. of A. Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Hold on. Captain America, Civil War. Oh, fuck. Sorry, it's the other one. Captain America, the First Avenger. Well, it's good. No, I'm just kidding. I actually really like this film. I think it's probably the best in the MCU at this point, after the first Iron Man, and it's got really strong characters that I think are pretty fun. Again, like Thor, this really starts to feel like the universe is becoming something. Setting in the past is awesome, and I really love how the film looks like it's in the 40s, not just in set design but also in colors. The feel of the film really does feel like the 40s to me, and I love it. Also love how wholesome the movie is. I just find it to be a really, really wholesome and cozy war film, even though I never expected to think of a war film as wholesome and cozy. That's kind of weird. Again, the movie feels like it's set in the same universe as Iron Man and Thor, especially with having Howard Stark be there. It's really, really cool. I love how it mentions like vibranium. It's the origin of S.H.I.E.L.D. It sets up the Tesseract. Again, this is a movie that manages to be its own movie while also feel like it's fitting into the universe and setting up for future movies, and it doesn't take away from the film as a whole for me. Unfortunately, I think the movie just suffers from having super similar tone and feel to the rest of the movies in this phase, and while I get that it is to build consistency, once you get here, it kind of starts to feel like all these films were cut from the same cloth, except The Incredible Hulk. That was cut from 2007 bad movie cloth. But yeah, overall, I think this is like a strong 8 out of 10. I had a good time watching it, and I think Red Skull is a little bit lackluster, but he's still a better villain than most of the other Phase 1 villains in my opinion. Here it is, everyone. Here it is. It's the big one. The big one, guys. It's the Avengers. So you take like 6 characters, all of whom have the potential to be main characters, and throw them into a film without any time for individual arcs, and you expect it to somehow work, and it does. It's insane. How did they do it? A deal with the devil. How else could they have done it? I love how well this movie comes together. It fits into the world so well and feels like such a natural culmination of the previous 6 films. The quality of the film itself is really solid too. It's funny, has a lot of great action scenes, every character gets a moment to shine, and a few of them even get their own arcs throughout it, and it's awesome to see. The climax is really dope, and Loki is a super fun villain for the film. He's a little bit worse than he is in the first Thor movie, but I still think he's a really, really good villain. The best part of the movie, though, is easily how it takes things from from every film. Black Widow in the setup of Avengers from Iron Man 2, Loki and Eric Selvig from Thor, even Hawkeye to an extent from Thor, the Tesseract from the first Avenger, and even Hydra weapons on S.H.I.E.L.D. It is so well done that it is amazing to watch. I love how seamless it does it too. The film isn't just a crossover of characters, it's a crossover of major plot points. It's not even just a crossover, it's a culmination, a finale, a wrap up, a climax, and it is so cool to see these characters that you've watched meet up, but seeing so many separate and seemingly unconnected plot points convene into a single film is even cooler than that. Marvel seemingly built a universe out of scratch and made it pay off in 6 films that honestly could have been the entire series. They could have stopped here and it would have been a tight-knit, solid 6-film story, but they had to go and ruin it. Of course, there are some issues. Some characters don't get too much time to shine, like Thor and Hawkeye, and I think the middle of the movie isn't as good as I remember, and the kind of wonder that the film had on original watch is gone after future MCU movies top it, but it's still a really, really great time, and I love how they managed to do everything that they did. Solid 8 out of 10 movie. It could even be a 9 out of 10 for me one day, but for right now, I'm feeling like it's a solid 8 out of 10. Really good movie and really great climax to the MCU. So that's it for phase 1. I honestly think that while it may be lacking in having some damn good and amazing movies, this phase makes up for it in its unity and cohesion. With the exception of Iron Man 2, I think every film bleeds into the Avengers without feeling like a detriment to the quality of the individual film, and I think that's a serious achievement. Sure, the films may vary in quality, none of them might be amazing or wonderful, and they may all feel pretty samey and cut from the same cloth, but it all worked out and paid off in the end because we got a truly special thing out of it that'll never be done again and feel the same as it did then. And that is how Marvel built a universe.